What if I told you that the most iconic stars of Hollywood's golden age, those we revere as gods of the silver screen, were also prisoners of their own myths? Behind the velvet curtain, beyond the lights and red carpets, lay a different truth, one of control, sacrifice, and secrets they hoped would never surface. This isn't just about trivia. This is about what they didn't want you to know. Katharine Hepburn, the symbol of fierce independence, hid a love story forbidden by social standards. Humphrey Bogart, the eternal tough guy, played roles he despised to stay afloat in a studio system that owned his very image. And Marlon Brando, the poster child of rebellion, was tormented by demons far deeper than any role he ever played. These legends built their names on glamour, but it was often a mask, meticulously crafted by the studios and held in place by fear, contracts, and survival. Their public personas, polished. Their real lives, often messy, tragic, and heartbreakingly human. So tonight, we lift the curtain. We go beyond the roles, beyond the press releases, and into the shadows of the stars themselves. Are you ready to see your favorite icons like never before? Which star do you think had the darkest secret to hide? Let's find out. Fact 1. Humphrey Bogart, the tough guy who felt trapped. On screen, he was the epitome of cool, the hardened romantic of Casablanca, the cynical detective in The Big Sleep. But in reality, Humphrey Bogart spent much of his career shackled by a system that dictated his every move. Despite his image as a no-nonsense rebel, Bogart had little control over the roles he played or the persona he projected. In the early years, Warner Brothers owned him. Literally, the studio's contracts gave them the right to loan him out, reassign scripts, and even interfere in his private life. He was cast as gangsters and hard-boiled men, not because he chose them, but because he was typecast and because it sold tickets. Bogart hated many of these parts, once confessing that he felt like a piece of meat passed around the butcher's table. It wasn't until later in life, when he co-founded his own production company, that Bogart finally claimed some autonomy. But even then, he knew the truth. The man the world adored was a construction, an armor he wore to survive a world that never cared about his truth. Was Humphrey Bogart truly Hollywood's rebel, or just another prisoner behind its golden bars? Fact 2. Katharine Hepburn, the independent woman with a hidden love. Katharine Hepburn shattered stereotypes. She wore trousers before it was acceptable. She spoke her mind when silence was expected, and she refused to conform to Hollywood's feminine ideals. But for all her defiance, Hepburn guarded one secret with quiet desperation, her decades-long romance with Spencer Tracy. Tracy was married a practicing Catholic who refused divorce. Their relationship, though one of Hollywood's most whispered-about secrets, was never officially acknowledged in public. For over 25 years, Hepburn stood by him. She watched him battle alcoholism, lived in the shadows of his marriage, and remained silent during award speeches and interviews. Love, for her, meant invisibility. Ironically, the woman seen as a symbol of liberation spent the majority of her romantic life hiding. She once said, "I never wanted to be a poster girl for anything." But maybe, deep down, she feared that even her strength had limits in a world that punished women for wanting both power and love. Did Katharine Hepburn choose her silence, or was it chosen for her? Fact 3. Marlon Brando, a genius haunted by chaos. Marlon Brando redefined acting. He brought rawness, intensity, and an electric unpredictability to the screen that no one had seen before. But behind that brilliance was a man often unmoored, fighting authority, sabotaging himself, and drowning in his own contradiction. From the start, Brando despised Hollywood's authority figures. He clashed with directors, refused rehearsals, and often improvised lines to the dismay of his co-stars. His performance in A Streetcar Named Desire launched him into superstardom, but he quickly grew disillusioned. He called acting an empty and meaningless profession. Even as studios threw millions his way, his personal life was no less turbulent. Affairs, lawsuits, broken relationships, and a tragic family history, including his son's murder conviction and his daughter's suicide, cast long shadows over his later years. Brando's refusal to play by the rules made him a legend, but it also made him deeply lonely. In the end, the man hailed as a genius was just trying to outrun the chaos that followed him on and off screen. Was Marlon Brando a revolutionary artist, or just a man at war with himself? Fact 4. Bette Davis, the queen who refused to bow. Bette Davis was fire in human form. Her eyes could cut through silence, and her performances radiated power. But the very system that turned her into a star also tried to break her spirit repeatedly. In the 1930 seconds, Davis went to war with Warner Brothers, furious over roles she deemed beneath her talent. While most actors kept quiet for fear of retaliation, Davis did the unthinkable. She sued her studio. Her goal wasn't more money, it was freedom. She lost the case, but won a new kind of respect, forcing studios to take her seriously. Behind her sharp tongue and fierce independence was a woman battered by love and betrayal. She endured multiple failed marriages and a bitter public feud with her daughter, who later wrote a scathing memoir. The woman who never flinched on camera was, in real life, often surrounded by emotional landmines. Bette Davis didn't just act, she fought. And sometimes, the role of warrior was the one that hurt her the most. Did Bette Davis conquer Hollywood, or did she simply outlast its cruelty? Fact 5. Clark Gable, the king with a manufactured crown. He was the king of Hollywood, the dashing Rhett Butler of Gone with the Wind. But Clark Gable's reign was anything but effortless. MGM sculpted him into royalty, hiding his insecurities, reshaping his teeth, and burying his past. Few know that Gable had a speech impediment early in life and struggled with self-esteem. The studios fixed his image literally with dental surgeries, fashion coaching, and relentless branding. He was told who to date, how to walk, even how to smile. Perhaps the darkest secret was his relationship with Loretta Young, with whom he fathered a child during the filming of Call of the Wild. The pregnancy was hidden, the child secretly adopted, and Gable never publicly acknowledged his daughter. He was adored, envied, and immortalized, but always on the studio's terms. The crown he wore was forged in silence and sacrifice. Was Clark Gable truly the king, or just the studio's most convincing illusion? Fact 6. Judy Garland, the star they worked to death. To the world, she was Dorothy, the girl with the ruby slippers and the voice of innocence. But Judy Garland's real-life journey was anything but magical. From a young age, she was thrown into the Hollywood machine, molded, controlled, and drugged into obedience. At just 13, MGM executives deemed her not pretty enough and forced her onto strict diets. They gave her amphetamines to suppress appetite and barbiturates to sleep. This pattern, stimulate, perform, sedate, continued for years. Garland became dependent, emotionally unstable, and increasingly fragile. Despite her immense talent, she was constantly treated as a product. Her breakdowns were tabloid fodder, her marriages collapsed, her finances were a mess. By the end of her life, she was performing in small clubs just to make ends meet. Judy Garland lit up the screen like no one else, but her radiance came at a cost she never chose to pay. Was Judy's tragic ending inevitable or engineered by an industry that devours its young? Fact 7. Montgomery Clift, the beauty broken from within. Montgomery Clift was the embodiment of vulnerability on screen, sensitive, brooding, magnetic. But off camera, he was unraveling. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Clift didn't hide his emotional fragility. He couldn't. It leaked through his performances, his silence, his eyes. In 1956, a devastating car crash disfigured his face. The studios tried to cover it up with lighting tricks and heavy makeup, but Clift was never the same. His drinking intensified, his dependence on painkillers grew. His performances became haunted never more so than in The Misfits, where every word seemed soaked in suffering. There was also the quiet truth. Clift was gay, in a time when being outed meant the end of everything. He lived a dual life, hiding behind polite smiles and cryptic interviews. Even in his closest circles, few knew the full extent of his internal war. They called him one of the most beautiful men in Hollywood. But beauty, in Clift's case, was both a blessing and a trap. Did Hollywood destroy Montgomery Clift, or did it simply exploit his pain until he couldn't carry it anymore? Fact 8. Ava Gardner, the woman studios couldn't control. Ava Gardner was the definition of untamed glamour. Her beauty was otherworldly, her voice sultry, and her presence dangerous. But she refused to be tamed by studios, by husbands, or by the public. She was married to Mickey Rooney, Artie Shaw, and Frank Sinatra, all relationships marred by infidelity, possessiveness, and volatility. MGM tried to use her allure to market films, pushing her into sex symbol roles, but Gardner often rejected scripts, skipped publicity tours, and walked out of meetings. She famously said, "I have only one rule in acting, trust the director and give him heart." Her affair with bullfighter Luis Miguel Dominguez scandalized America. Her refusal to conform infuriated executives, but she never flinched. She lived hard, loved recklessly, and chose freedom over image. Ava Gardner wasn't broken by the system. she burned right through it. Was Ava Gardner a cautionary tale, or the rare woman who beat Hollywood at its own game? Fact 9. Rock Hudson, America's heartthrob with a forbidden life. To millions, Rock Hudson was the perfect man, tall, chiseled, charming. He starred in romantic comedies, war dramas, and westerns. He dated beautiful starlets, attended studio-arranged premieres, and grinned for the cameras. But it was all a lie. Behind closed doors, Hudson was a closeted gay man, living in constant fear of exposure. The studio controlled his image with military precision. When rumors surfaced, they orchestrated fake dates, planted tabloid stories, and even arranged a marriage to his secretary. Hudson's secret was finally exposed in the most tragic way: his death from AIDS in 1985. The revelation sent shockwaves through Hollywood and forced the world to confront its hypocrisy. But by then, the damage was done. Hudson had lived and died in silence. He played lovers on screen but could never publicly love in real life. Was Rock Hudson a victim of his time or of an industry that demanded a lie to sell the fantasy? Fact 10. Joan Crawford, the star obsessed with control. Joan Crawford rose from poverty to become one of the most recognizable stars of the silver screen. But the image she projected, poised, glamorous, untouchable, was the result of obsession, fear, and an iron grip over every aspect of her life. She meticulously controlled her appearance, down to the angle of her eyebrows and the shine of her shoes. She scrubbed her skin raw, bleached her teeth until they hurt, and monitored every calorie. Crawford knew Hollywood was a beast that devoured aging women, and she refused to be a casualty. But behind that discipline was a darker legacy. Her adopted daughter, Christina, later published the explosive memoir, Mommy Dearest, portraying Crawford as a controlling, abusive mother obsessed with perfection. The book shocked the world and redefined her public image. For decades, Crawford embodied the ideal of the movie star. But when the cameras stopped rolling, what remained was a woman at war with time, truth, and herself. Was Joan Crawford a master of her destiny, or just another creation sculpted by fear? Fact 11. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckler with a darker blade. Errol Flynn was the original action hero, the dashing rogue in the adventures of Robin Hood, the charming swordsman with a smirk. But the real Flynn was far more dangerous than the characters he played. He was accused multiple times of statutory assault, though never convicted. He openly embraced his bad boy image, once stating, "I like my whiskey old and my women young." His drinking was legendary, his womanizing reckless, and his disregard for consequences absolute. Studios knew of his behavior. They buried police reports, paid off reporters, and leaned into his scandalous aura as a marketing tool. The public lapped it up, buying into the myth of the rogue with a heart of gold. But behind the scenes, many feared him. Crew members whispered about his rages. Actresses warned each other about private encounters. The man with the sword also wielded silence. Was Errol Flynn merely a product of his time, or a predator cloaked in charisma? Fact 12. Ingrid Bergman, the exile of virtue. Ingrid Bergman was the face of purity. Her role in Casablanca made her the sweetheart of wartime cinema. But when she fell in love with Italian director Roberto Rossellini while still married, Hollywood and America turned on her with venom. She bore Rossellini's child out of wedlock, and suddenly the actress once hailed for her grace was labeled a homewrecker, immoral, even a danger to American values. Congress denounced her. Fan clubs disbanded. She was unofficially blacklisted and fled to Europe. What's most shocking is how little grace she was afforded for making a personal decision. Male stars with far worse scandals were forgiven overnight. But Bergman, a woman who followed her heart, was cast into exile. Years later, she returned triumphantly and won an Oscar. But the scars of exile remained. Her crime? Loving someone on her own terms. Was Ingrid Bergman punished for her choices or for daring to be human in a world that demanded illusion? Fact 13. James Dean, the rebel who died before he could escape. James Dean became a legend with just 3 major films, none of which he lived to see succeed. His death at 24 immortalized him, but also froze him in a myth that obscured the storm he was trying to outrun. Dean was awkward, insecure, and known for his emotional volatility. He had a deep fear of abandonment stemming from the death of his mother when he was 9. Colleagues described him as both mesmerizing and maddening. Directors struggled with his unpredictability, and friends worried about his recklessness. There were whispers about his sexuality, about relationships with older men in the industry, rumors neither confirmed nor denied, but carefully avoided in public. Dean played outsiders because he was one. Even in life, he didn't belong anywhere for long. He once said, "Dream as if you'll live forever. Live as if you'll die today." He did just that. but we're left wondering what truths he never had time or courage to reveal. Was James Dean the embodiment of youthful rebellion, or a man crushed by the weight of expectation before he could find peace? Fact 14. Rita Hayworth, the goddess who was always acting. Rita Hayworth was the dream of a generation, the fiery redhead with smoldering eyes and hypnotic grace. But behind the iconography was a woman forever running from herself. Born Margarita Carmen Cancino, she was forced to change her name, her hairline, even her ethnicity. Her studio bleached her skin, raised her forehead through electrolysis, and repackaged her as the ultimate American siren. She once said, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me." It was a cry of frustration from a woman who had become her role. Her marriages, 5 in total, were marked by disappointment and betrayal, including a turbulent union with Orson Welles and a deeply disturbing marriage to Prince Ali Khan. Despite her fame, she was plagued by loneliness and later struggled with early-onset Alzheimer's, long before anyone recognized the symptoms. Hollywood adored her image, but it never made room for the real woman beneath it. Was Rita Hayworth ever truly loved or just adored for the fantasy she was forced to become? Fact 15. Tony Curtis, the heartthrob who hated his reflection. Tony Curtis had the looks of a Greek statue and the swagger of a Bronx kid who knew he'd made it. He became a box office sensation, starred opposite Marilyn Monroe, and lived a life of luxury, but he couldn't stand what he saw in the mirror. He often spoke of his impoverished childhood, growing up in a Hungarian Jewish family where food was scarce and affection rarer. Hollywood was his escape, but also his curse. He underwent cosmetic surgery to refine his nose and teeth. He cultivated a polished accent to erase traces of his past. Every detail of Tony Curtis was engineered, even his name. As the years passed, he turned bitter about being typecast as a pretty boy. He wanted serious roles, respect, depth, but the industry rarely gave him more than a wink and a smile. He fell into addiction, lost touch with his children, and battled loneliness in his later years. Curtis once admitted, "I was always acting, even when I wasn't on camera." Was Tony Curtis ever accepted for who he was, or only for who he pretended to be? Fact 16. Elizabeth Taylor, the violet-eyed prisoner of passion. Elizabeth Taylor lived a life most would envy: 8 marriages, jewels fit for royalty, and an Oscar-winning career that spanned decades. But behind the tabloid headlines and violet eyes was a woman caught in a relentless cycle of craving love and fearing solitude. Married at 18, widowed at 26, divorced 7 times, Taylor's personal life often eclipsed her acting. Her affair with Richard Burton, conducted while both were married to others, triggered public outrage. The Vatican condemned it as erotic vagrancy, yet their chemistry, both on and off screen, was undeniable and often destructive. She also battled addiction, endured chronic illness, and underwent more than 30 surgeries. Fame didn't protect her, it magnified her pain. She once said, "I've been through it all, baby. I'm Mother Courage." Taylor was worshipped, judged, and devoured by the same public that demanded her to be larger than life. But in truth, she was just trying to find someone to stay. Was Elizabeth Taylor a fearless lover, or simply a woman desperate not to be left alone? Fact 17. Laurence Olivier, the Great Pretender. Sir Laurence Olivier was widely hailed as the greatest actor of his generation, a Shakespearean god who conquered both stage and screen. But few knew how deeply he struggled with insecurity, imposter syndrome, and the weight of perfection. Olivier was obsessively competitive, especially with Marlon Brando and other method actors who upended his classical style. Though knighted and celebrated, he privately feared irrelevance. His diaries revealed self-loathing, doubt, and even disdain for many of his most acclaimed roles. His marriage to Vivien Leigh, one of Hollywood's great beauties, was tumultuous. As Leigh spiraled into mental illness, Olivier distanced himself, then carried that guilt for the rest of his life. He was also known to have had discreet relationships with men, kept hidden in a time when exposure meant scandal, or worse. For all his mastery of illusion, Olivier never quite knew who he was without a script. Did Laurence Olivier conquer the art of acting, or did he hide behind it all his life? Fact 18. Marilyn Monroe, the icon who became a product. Marilyn Monroe wasn't born Marilyn. She was Norma Jean Mortensen, a girl shuffled between foster homes and orphanages, molded by trauma long before Hollywood got to her. But once they did, they sculpted her into the ultimate fantasy and stripped her of everything real. She dyed her hair blonde, altered her speech, trained to walk like a breeze over a hot sidewalk. The studios made her dumb so the audience wouldn't feel threatened, but Monroe was anything but. She read Dostoevsky, studied acting at the Actors Studio, and fought for better roles and better pay. Her mental health deteriorated under the pressure. Addictions followed. Affairs with powerful men, including rumored ties to both John and Robert Kennedy, only deepened her isolation. Her death at 36 was officially ruled an overdose. Unofficially, it's still debated. Suicide, accident, or something more sinister? She once said, "Hollywood is a place where they'll pay you $1,000 for a kiss and 50 cents for your soul." Was Marilyn Monroe destroyed by fame or by the men who profited from her myth? Fact 19. Spencer Tracy, the devoted star with a silent torment. Spencer Tracy was known for his stoic presence, commanding voice, and seemingly effortless performances. He won 2 Oscars, worked alongside the biggest stars, and was revered for his authenticity. But behind the stillness was a man locked in quiet agony. A devout Catholic, Tracy never divorced his wife despite a decades-long affair with Katharine Hepburn. The arrangement, while discreet, tormented him. He struggled with alcoholism for most of his adult life, often disappearing for days during filming. He was said to carry deep guilt not just about his personal life, but about his son's deafness, which he mistakenly blamed on himself. He loathed public displays, refused to discuss his private affairs, and battled with depression in silence. Even in death, Hepburn did not attend his funeral out of respect for his wife. Tracy's legacy was a masterclass in restraint, on screen and off. But that restraint came at an emotional cost no award could ever ease. Was Spencer Tracy a pillar of dignity or a man so chained by guilt he never allowed himself to truly live? Fact 20. Greta Garbo, the star who disappeared herself. Greta Garbo remains one of Hollywood's greatest enigmas. Her beauty was mythic, her performances hypnotic, and then, at the height of her fame, she vanished. At 36, she walked away from the industry and never returned. Garbo despised publicity. She avoided interviews, refused autographs, and often fled from paparazzi. The phrase, "I want to be alone," spoken in Grand Hotel, became her haunting mantra, both a line of dialogue and a prophecy. Some saw it as eccentricity, others suspected a deeper wound. There were rumors about her sexuality, her secret romances, her deep melancholia. Friends described her as emotionally reclusive, plagued by existential dread. Despite millions in the bank and global fame, Garbo spent much of her life walking alone through Manhattan in oversized sunglasses, speaking to no one. She rejected the world that worshipped her, not because she hated it, but perhaps because she feared it would never love the real her. Did Greta Garbo find peace in solitude, or simply escape a world that never knew how to hold her? Bonus fact: the silent contracts of the studio system. While the stars carried their secrets, the studios held the keys to silence. During Hollywood's golden age, actors signed contracts that bordered on captivity clauses that dictated everything from their weight to their marriages. Studios like MGM and Warner Brothers employed fixers, shadowy figures who paid off mistresses, silenced the press, and buried scandals before they could make headlines. A star caught in an affair? The fixer paid for a discreet abortion. A leading man rumored to be gay? They arranged lavender marriages and planted paparazzi shots with female co-stars. These contracts weren't just paperwork, they were weapons. Stars who resisted were blacklisted, smeared in tabloids, or quietly erased. Those who complied became icons. But the cost was staggering. And the most chilling part? Many of these documents, written in quiet offices under the hum of ceiling fans, still sit in locked studio vaults, unsigned by time, but signed in fear. How many legends were created by talent, and how many were sculpted by control? The legends of Hollywood's golden age weren't just born, they were built, constrained, and often destroyed. Behind every glowing marquee was a story of silence. Behind every famous face, a hidden life. Which of these stories shocked you the most? Do you think these stars would have chosen fame if they'd known the cost? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more truth behind the myths, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Because in Hollywood, the curtain may fall, but the secrets never sleep.